Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Silverstone Formula One Grand Prix for 2024 is done and dusted. We've got a Lewis Hamilton win number 104 in the bank, and we've got McLaren CEO Zak Brown saying they got it wrong, aka they bottled it by not bringing in Piastri and double stacking them. I think that was a major mistake by McLaren. Full credit to Hamilton for getting that home win. But yeah, McLaren had it in the bag. They had a 1-2 in the bag, and because they were too scared to double stack, they decided not to. At the time, they actually got Zak Brown during the live coverage on the phone to the commentators. They were in 1-2. They asked about double stacking, and they said, "Yeah, we're a bit cautious of that. They are so close together." So, Mr. Zak Brown, all you had to do was tell Piastri to back off a little bit. He was only a second behind Norris, and then you had a 2-second gap back to Lewis when that big cell of rain was coming. There was nothing stopping you from telling Piastri to slow down the pace a bit, get them a 3-second gap up to Norris, so that way, when the rain came, which it did, you'd be able to put both cars on the ideal lap. Obviously, instead, what we had happening was Norris and Hamilton came in on the correct lap. Piastri did another lap on the slicks on a wet track. When Norris came out of the pits, there was a 20-odd second gap up to Piastri, and by the time Piastri came around to make his pit stop, that had been taken down to 2 seconds. So he lost 18 seconds on that one lap. As we go through the results, you will see Piastri only ended up 12 seconds behind the race win. So losing those 18 seconds by the McLaren strategy fumble could have definitely costed Piastri yet again. So he's not had a good run. But obviously, as we see there, Lewis taking home the dub. We had Max closing in on those hard tyres, 1.4 seconds behind in the end. Lando bringing home P3, the final step of the podium. Oscar P4, followed by Sainz, Nico Hülkenberg, Lance Stroll, Fernando, Albon, and then Yuki rounding out the top 10. So, super interesting race. I think the main thing that made it interesting was definitely the weather. We ended up having 3 teams all battling it out for the win. We had the Mercedes, the Red Bulls, and the McLaren. It could have been any one of those cars that win. Obviously, Lewis and George both looking like they were in with a good crack until the George fuel pump issue. Either of the McLarens could have won, and obviously Max in there as well, really chasing down Lewis in the end. Let's not talk about Charles and Perez just yet, but super interesting race, super competitive. Obviously, the fact that the weather came in those 2 parts, had the smaller cell of rain followed by the larger cell, meant that we got dry, wet, which you don't see too often in a Formula 1 race. So I think we're just really fortunate with the timing there. But yeah, I think the state of Formula 1 at the moment is super, super good. We've had now 6 winners in the first 12 races of the season. If you go back the 28 races before that, we only had 3 winners over 28 races. So I think that's pretty exceptional to see that we're getting so much competitiveness back in the field again. Obviously interesting for Lewis Hamilton. Great that he got the win, but interesting that he's going to Ferrari next year. And it really does look like they're dropping the ball at the moment, doesn't it? They were comfortably second fastest car at the start of the season, but now I would say, if anything, they're the 4th fastest car. I think we've got McLaren with potentially a car to rival the Red Bull for the fastest car, and Mercedes looks like they've cemented that 3rd fastest car now. So Lewis looking over his shoulder with Carlos Sainz finishing 47 seconds behind, and of course lapping Charles with that blunder of the tyre decision for him. Maybe not looking so good a decision after all, but time will indeed tell. I think, the biggest talking point for today, though, is just the fact that, McLaren had the 1-2 in the bag. They were scared to do the double stack, and that obviously left Norris vulnerable. If they'd double stacked them, they probably would have ended up with Norris and Piastri still in P1 and 2, and then when it was time to go onto the dry tyres, I think they would have, again had that rear gunner for Norris at very least, but they would have also had Piastri much more closer to that fight. Obviously, as I said, he lost 18 seconds in that one lap and finished 12 seconds off the race win. So, him going on to those medium tyres in the end, which looked like the right decision, he would have been there or thereabouts for that race win as well. So, Massive fumble by McLaren, but hey, they're not the only team that fumbled, are they? Both Ferrari and Red Bull putting a couple of their drivers onto intermediates on a dry track. So that's fun. I've looked at a few videos of people who were at the track at the time, and they said at the time that Charles and Perez came in for the intermediates, yes, it was spitting very minorly. Yes, people were losing a few seconds here or there, but those intermediates were not quick, to say the least. They lost a minute in the coming laps, got lapped very quickly. Just not a good day at the office for either Perez or Charles. Charles does seem like he's sold his soul to the devil for that Monaco win, because since then we've had 4 races and he's been lapped in 3 out of 4 of those races after picking up the P1 at his hometown of Monaco. So awful streak of luck for the Monegasque. And Perez, well, you don't want to be him at the moment, that's for sure. He obviously got that contract extension, but apparently there are performance clauses in there. One in terms of how many points he needs to be within Verstappen. I can't remember the exact amount, but I think he's almost on the cusp of being over that already. And then another one that he needs to finish within 5 positions of the championship finishing position of Max. And if we look at the current positions, with P1 Max, that would mean that Perez needs to finish the year in 6th position. If we look at him at the moment, P6, but with the current run of form that Mercedes is having with Russell and Hamilton, they're only 7 and 8 points back respectively. I would say that P6 for Perez isn't looking good. There's definitely a good chance that he'll be falling back to that P8, which then opens up the ability for Red Bull to sack him, which rightfully so should be the case. But then the only question then is who goes into that second seat. Obviously, there's been lots of talks of Danny, if he can get his form up a little bit. He's come right recently, obviously not able to get one up on his teammate today, but he's obviously the golden boy for Christian Horner. I would be surprised if he had a good rest of the season if he weren't to take that second Red Bull seat. But then you have the likes of Lawson as well, who's testing in the Red Bull car literally this week. If he puts in some good times, then who knows? Maybe they'd chuck in the rookie and sack Perez mid-season just to give him a bit of a test and see how he goes. But yeah, very, very interesting. Other news out of Ferrari is that Enrico Cardiel is leaving. He's been with the team for 2 decades. He is a current technical director for the chassis department. So, bit of a shame for the Ferrari fans like myself, but you got to think there is a big name roaming around the pits at the moment who could take up that role in the name of Adrian Newey. So, potentially that's someone that they're eyeing up to take that position. Hopefully, we will see what happens. But yeah, time will tell. Going through the rest of the results though, obviously looking at Nico there, he has now scored more points in the last 2 races by having 2 P6 finishes than Perez has in the last 6 races. So, Hulk doing more Hulk things. He's been on an unreal streak of form this year. Obviously moving to stake next year. Hopefully they can then turn that into a fast car when Audi takes over in 2026. That all illustrious podium finish for him is something that I think he deserves. He's definitely got the talent. Obviously never had the car under him to really bring it home. Yes, he's obviously bottled a few opportunities himself, but those were only in situations where it was very unlikely for him to be able to get the car into the podium positions as it was when he was driving things like the Force India and whatnot. So, yeah, very interesting. Obviously, Max coming home P2. He's had 2 of his worst races, in my opinion, of the last 4 years in the last 2 races. Obviously, the Red Bull Ring, having that accident, coming home in P5, and then today, that Red Bull was the 3rd fastest car. The Mercedes and the McLaren both had faster cars than him. So for him to come home in P2, to extend his lead in the championship in both the Red Bull Ring and today, when he had no right to do so, is just testament to not only the team, for obviously giving him a good, solid, steady, reliable car, but also credit to Max for putting in those laps, being consistent, saving those tyres. He's always there or thereabouts even when he's having an off day, which is something you can't say for his teammate. So yeah, very, very interesting race. Again, congratulations to Lulu for bringing home the dub. May well be, it's 950 odd days since his last win. Hopefully, since he's moving to the red team, it won't be quite as long before his next team. But all in all, fantastic race at Silverstone. I do think the McLaren team need to work on their confidence and their strategy. All they had to do was get Piastri to give a 3-second gap up to Lando and then double stack the cars on the correct lap, and then they had a 1-2 for the team at home in the bank. But instead they were scared. They left Lando vulnerable and handed the win to Lewis. So very interesting. Be interesting to see where the rest of the year heads. We've got a tight battle, as you can see, for the championship, P2 anyway. So taking Max out of the equation, you can see we've got a good little tight little battle. 21 points now between P2 and P3, and Sainz catching him as well. So who knows what will happen there if Ferrari find a bit more form over the summer break. Then that could definitely make the P2 and the championship fight a little bit more interesting. But there we have it. That is my summary for the 2024 Silverstone Grand Prix. Let me know what your thoughts were about the race, and we'll see you again next time.